A typical 1970s afternoon in the American suburbs. A driver pulls into their driveway, pushes the automatic transmission lever into park, leaves the engine idling, and steps out to check the mail. Seconds later, the 2-ton machine violently lunges backward under its own power, crushing the driver against a garage door or a fence. These bizarre sequences began appearing in police reports and insurance claims across the country. Drivers insisted their vehicles were securely parked, only to watch them seemingly drive themselves backward. The public soon dubbed them poltergeist cars. For years, law enforcement and insurance adjusters placed the blame squarely on human frailties. They insisted the victims had simply forgotten to shift fully into park before exiting their vehicles, compounding the physical trauma with the stigma of driver negligence. The fault actually lay deep within the steering columns of almost the entire Ford, Lincoln, and Mercury lineup built between 1966 and 1980. Declassified federal safety investigations eventually revealed the scope of the issue. The defect was present in 23 million vehicles operating on American roads. Federal regulators gathered engineering data proving exactly why these machines were slipping into powered reverse. Yet the United States government permitted the automaker to completely bypass a physical mechanical repair. The authorized remedy for a lethal transmission failure was a massive mailer campaign. Owners received a letter containing a small black and silver adhesive sticker to place on their dashboard, advising them to properly engage the parking brake. This engineering flaw placed Ford's financial survival in direct conflict with the safety of its customers, leading to a compromise paid for with human lives. Inside the automatic transmissions of that era, specifically Ford's C3, C6, and FMX models, gear selection is governed by a metal detent system located in the steering column. This diagram visualizes a component called the rooster comb. In a safe transmission design, moving the shifter pushes a roller down into deep, sharp valleys, locking the mechanism securely into the park position. Ford's design introduced a fatal flaw. Between the park valley and the reverse valley, engineers left a dangerously wide, flat ridge, known internally as the gatepost. When an average driver pulled the column shifter, they felt a physical stop. But often, the heavy mechanical linkage hadn't seated in the valley. It was balancing precariously right on top of this flat gatepost, creating a state of illusory park. Because the roller was balancing on that flat surface, the kinetic shock of slamming the driver's side door, or even the natural vibration of an idling V8 engine, provided enough mechanical energy to dislodge it. The roller would slide off the gatepost and drop cleanly into the adjacent reverse valley. This microscopic shift instantly spiked the transmission's hydraulic pressure. The interlocking metal gears violently engaged, immediately dropping a 2-ton vehicle into powered reverse. The mechanical margin between a stationary vehicle and a lethal projectile was a fraction of a millimeter of flat metal. This single design choice made 23 million everyday vehicles lethally unpredictable. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration officially opened an investigation into the defect in 1977. Led by Administrator Joan Claybrook, federal safety advocates spent 3 years compiling the engineering data to prove the transmissions were killing people. Mandating a mechanical fix meant recalling 23 million vehicles. Dealership technicians across the country would have to physically inspect and replace worn steering column lock plates, shift linkages, and internal transmission components on almost every Ford built over a 14-year period. Executing the largest automotive safety action in history carried a massive financial penalty. A mandatory physical recall was projected to cost the automaker an estimated $1 billion in parts and labor. In the macroeconomic context of 1980, the American auto industry was already in a severe crisis. Detroit's Big Three were posting historic losses, and absorbing a $1 billion recall threatened to push the Ford Motor Company directly into Chapter 11 bankruptcy. What began as a public safety investigation now carried significant economic weight, forcing a choice between the survival of an industrial giant and the physical safety of the public. This regulatory friction peaked during the political transition of late 1980. The outgoing Carter administration was preparing to hand power. For the low price of postage and paper, a multi-billion-dollar corporation successfully negotiated a legal loophole. The government effectively allowed them to transfer the responsibility for a lethal engineering failure directly onto the public. A piece of adhesive paper did nothing to alter the dangerous physics of a worn-out transmission detent. Because the underlying mechanics were never repaired, heavy vehicles like the F-Series trucks continued to roll away and crush people throughout the 1980s and 1990s. This chart visualizes the lethal aftermath of the compromise. A comprehensive review conducted by NHTSA in 1985 concluded that the defect was responsible for at least 306 verified deaths, alongside thousands of crippling crush injuries and amputations. Abandoned by federal regulators, victims and their families had no recourse but the civil justice system. Throughout the ensuing decades, Ford was inundated with a tidal wave of product liability and wrongful death lawsuits. During these trials, juries were presented with evidence of the systemic knowledge of the defect. Ford ultimately spent over $1.7 billion settling these claims. From an accounting perspective, the company effectively financed the cost of the defect through court payouts over 20 years, calculating that compensating dead consumers was a viable alternative to an immediate billion-dollar mechanical recall. The 1980 sticker compromise remains a permanent dark monument to regulatory capture. It stands as a permanent mourning of the human cost extracted when a government prioritizes corporate liquidity, allowing adhesive paper to substitute for physical safety. We want to know your thoughts on the sticker compromise. Let us know down in the comments, and be sure to subscribe to Archive World for more incredible histories.